Hello friends, it's me, and today, survival for the fittest. Let's check out Game Theory, how to survive an urban apocalypse. Tom Clancy, the Division Resurgence. From the Game Theories, together, let's go.
New York. The Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. But there's one title that's less a nickname and more just factual information. The 5 boroughs. Named that way because New York can be divided up into 5 separate chunks, or boroughs, each with their own personality. From the artsy vibes of Brooklyn to the rich cultural history of the Bronx. And let me tell you, despite them all being part of the exact same city, the rivalry between them gets intense. For decades, people have argued about which one is the best. But now there's Tom Clancy's Division Resurgence, which has entered the chat and squashed the debate. With only one major safe settlement throughout all the 5 boroughs, this game sent a statement. In a survival situation, one and only one borough would be the one to come out on top. But is the game right? Is it wrong? As a former New Yorker myself, I wasn't going to take this answer lying down. And so today, I'm going to settle the debate once and for all. When caught in an end-of-the-world scenario, which borough in New York is going to be the best borough in New York? This right here, this is going to be some crucial life-saving information. And don't you forget about it.
I like it that Matt Pat studying in New York before he lived in New York for a significant period of his life, so that's why he can actually say something about it. I can't. I live in Singapore.
Hello,
Matt Pat's Game Theory.
Oh, Internet, welcome to Game Theory, the show that's
Hello Internet, welcome to Game Theory.
Always prepared for the end of the world. And that constant paranoia is gonna come in handy because today's episode is sponsored by Ubisoft and their brand new mobile game, Division Resurgence. Now, if that name doesn't immediately sound familiar to you, it probably should. It's the latest installment in the iconic Tom Clancy series, which, if you've never played, is fantastic. These games are set in New York City, and not just a version of New York City, this is a completely accurate recreation of the real world, with streets and landmarks exactly where you'd expect them to be. And then, that's when you realize that Division Resurgence is a mobile game, which is just that much more impressive. It also means that I can now revisit my old memories of being a starving actor living in the Upper East Side whenever and wherever I want. Yippee. However, while it might be an accurate recreation, not everything is right in the Division's New York. An eco-terrorist has created an incredibly potent virus known as the green poison, which spreads through banknotes. As money switches hands, the viral infection grows. Fortunately, not all hope is lost. To stop the spread, the government shuts down the city. Nothing coming in, and more importantly, nothing coming out. Resurgence mostly takes place a few weeks after the start of the outbreak, when the good of humanity is still prevailing. While some people naturally turn to crime and violence, one group bands together to form the Spring Blossom Settlement, located in Manhattan down near Chinatown. Here, you can rest, gather supplies, and take on missions to help your fellow citizens as a one-man operation. But as someone who spent a good chunk of his early adult life living in New York, I felt old borough rivalries beginning to rise up. While this in-game settlement feels like a utopia inside of a city of chaos, of all the boroughs, did they really make the best call to plop it right here, smack dab in the middle of Manhattan? Sure, it's the place that everyone knows, but in a survival situation, yeah, I don't think that's gonna be a big point in its favor. Plus, there are just lots of hidden gems around the city of New York, which I'm sure most New York locals down in the comments are gonna
You haven't lived until you had Tony's on 22nd.
tell you. I really like the cookies from Levain Bakery, the soup dumplings from Joe's Shanghai, and the Broadway show Grey House. But it's a valid question.
Okay, the more you know, I guess, the more you know.
If New York suddenly shut down, isolating itself from the rest of the world, which borough would be the best borough for setting up your own personal safety bunker? You know how the song goes? They say that you won't last too long on Broadway. But, you know, maybe somewhere else could be a bit more sustainable. And now it's time to figure out where that is. In case you skipped out on 3rd grade geography, New York is split up into 5 boroughs. Manhattan, this sliver right here that most tourists think is just the entirety of New York. The Bronx, up in the north, known as the birthplace of hip-hop and home to the Yankees baseball team. Brooklyn, famous for its hipsters and not having a 9-9 precinct. Queens to the east.
It's also where Peter Parker, Spider-Man is, right? I hope I'm right. Maybe I'm right.
The largest of the boroughs, and Staten Island.
Queens, yes. Brooklyn and Queens. Brooklyn, the Captain America and Spider-Man. Yeah.
to the south, which is an island and has a ferry, I guess. Honestly, I never spend all that much time in Staten Island. Nevertheless, which of these is going to be our best home for survival? Let's find out. In the first side mission of the game, we're asked to help members of the Spring Blossom settlements retrieve their missing supplies. And while the types of supplies can vary from mission to mission, I think we can all agree on which one is going to be priority number one when it comes to IRL action: food. Fortunately, when it comes to food supplies, we have ourselves a couple different options. One obvious choice would be to raid local grocery stores and restaurants. Since 2017, the City of New York Mayor's Office issues a report on nightlife within the city, listing 25,800 total nightlife establishments, 19,400 of which are restaurants. Of the 5 boroughs, Manhattan leads the way by far, with 8,574 restaurants, which is almost twice Brooklyn's 4,400 and more than 10 times Staten Island's 750. That means that right after things go south, like we see it in the game, Manhattan is going to be teeming with food, which is good, but that food isn't going to last forever, which is bad. Eventually, that food's going to spoil, and then what? The gray streets and tall buildings of Manhattan aren't exactly bursting with huntable wildlife, unless you're really into pigeon meat, I suppose. Gathering really isn't going to be a strong option here either. Sure, you might be able to find a few berry bushes or a privately owned apple tree here or there, but there simply isn't enough wild flora to help support the estimated 4 billion pounds of fruits and veggies that New Yorkers are consuming in an average year. Nope, like humans for thousands of years since the Neolithic Revolution, you're gonna need to farm. Funny thing about farming though, you kinda need dirt to grow anything, and New York City ain't exactly known for its verdant forests. That said,
And also, not just any dirt, you need to have fertile dirt. Dirt that is very good for farming.
the characters that we meet in Division Resurgence gives us a clue on how they plan to solve the problem. Kevin Zhang informs us of their rooftop stockpiling greenhouses that have been set up to grow their own food.
What do you do for food?
This bridge leads to our rooftop stockpile. And then we got the greenhouses set up beyond that.
Setting one of these up from scratch can be a lot of effort. However, there is a New York bill currently circulating that aims to turn all public school rooftops into gardens. So for survival purposes, your best bet is going to be finding a borough with the most public schools so you can claim all that land for yourself. Staten Island comes in at the low end with 84 public schools. The Bronx and Queens, meanwhile, are very close to each other with 365 and 382 respectively. Brooklyn has a respectable 575 public schools, but in general, nothing comes close to Manhattan again with a massive 879 public schools. But having
Okay, wow. Wow.
the most available rooftop land is only the start of a sustainable solution here. There's still one key problem that we have to account for when it comes to food, and that's size. It takes a whole lot of land to keep a single person fed for the entirety of a year. Although estimates on this can vary greatly, the general consensus is that it takes somewhere around half an acre of land to grow enough crops to sustain a single person for a single year. That's the size of 4.5 NBA basketball courts. So, in addition to all those school roofs, we might need to find some additional land. Where else do we have available to farm these crops? Well, I'm sure that the first thing that jumped to most of your minds is Central Park, a huge park that's smack dab in the middle of Manhattan. And while Central Park is certainly larger in area than 2 whole countries, Vatican City and Monaco, it is not the largest park in New York. Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx is New York's largest park, at 3 times the size of Central Park. Greenbelt in Staten Island, Van Cortlandt in the Bronx, and Flushing Meadows in Queens are also all larger than Central Park. The point here being that if you want to convert parks to farms, there are other and better answers than just the obvious. Staten Island, for instance, actually comes out on top with 7,339 acres of park space, including that massive Greenbelt Park, but this one also has itself a problem. You see, a large part of Staten Island's parkland is built on top of a massive garbage pile. After the people of New York decided that they no longer wanted to look at massive trash towers, they decided to do the most responsible thing and just bury it all in dirt. Yeah, really, that is what they actually did. They buried these massive garbage dumps with soil, then got environmental engineers in to plant grasses and trees to reinforce the soil. Right now, it's actually doing pretty darn well, but if you attempted to farm all of that land, you would quickly plow out the new soil and root systems, and would just be left with a trash layer in no time. But then what about the Bronx? I've seen plenty of articles recently claiming that the Bronx is the greenest borough in NYC, with 24% of the total land designated as parkland. Queens is also representing itself well, with 7,180 acres of land dedicated to parks. But beyond
Wow.
just food, we also probably gotta talk about which borough is gonna help you defend yourself the most effectively. While I don't condone violence in any sort of way here, if you look at what happens in the world of Division Resurgence, I think it's pretty darn clear that firearms are gonna be a necessity in defending yourself and your rooftop farmland. Of the 5 boroughs, it's Staten Island that actually has the highest gun ownership rate, more than doubling the rate of Queens, the next most strapped borough. But that's just talking about gun ownership rates, not percentage of total guns owned. And if you take that into account, suddenly these 2 boroughs swap position. In fact, Staten Island drops way down on the leaderboard with only 15% of all legally owned firearms in New York, while Queens has closer to 24%. Now that may or may not be a good thing, because well, it now means that we know where those firearms are owned. They're exactly that. They are owned. They can be used against you. If you're looking for excess ammunition to use for yourself, well, that's another story. In the game, multiple boroughs are completely empty because all government-run facilities have fallen into chaos. In other words, there's no police force. And no police force means a lot of unused weapon repositories just hanging around, all fair game for us to go in and scoop up some resources. So which borough...
I've got to be honest with you, as someone that's been born and raised and grew up in Singapore, being trigger friendly,
has itself the most police precincts. In total, there are 77 across New York. Staten Island comes in with only 4, 12 in the Bronx, 16 in Queens, 22 in Manhattan, and finally, which borough has itself the... And no police force means a lot of unused weapon repositories just hanging around, all fair game for us to go in and scoop up some resources. So which borough has itself the most police precincts? In total, there are 77 across New York. Staten Island comes in with only 4, 12 in the Bronx, 16 in Queens, 22 in Manhattan, and finally Brooklyn with 23 total. It's kind of weird. Despite there only being 77 precincts, the number actually goes up to the 123rd precinct. Meanwhile, Brooklyn stops just shy of that 99 greatness, with its last one being the 94th. But perhaps the biggest and most important point to mention in any situation like this is population. Supply versus demand. During a citywide lockdown, as I'm sure we can all attest to, the demand for bare essentials skyrockets. And New York is the most populated city in the US. The more people there are, the thinner the resources are going to be stretched, and the more you're going to have to fight for your own survival. New York currently has a population of over 8.4 million people, and of the 5 boroughs, one always stands out as being a little bit different than the others. Staten Island. Staten Island is far less densely populated than the other 4 boroughs. Currently, there are around 475,000 people spread over its 60.9 square mile area, which is dwarfed by literally every other borough. The Bronx and Manhattan are over 3 times the size, at 1.5 million and 1.7 million people respectively. Queens is charging in with a massive 2.4 million people, but above them all is Brooklyn with a massive 2.7 million people. That said, sorry Brooklyn, this contest is more like golf. You want the lowest score to win, because at the end of the day, this is all about population density, and we want it to be as low as possible. Fewer people means fewer competition for resources and fewer hands that are gonna get me infected.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. That's a very, very good point. In a disaster, in an uncontrolled disaster, the main risk is humans. Humans are the main unknown risk.
Island unsurprisingly holds the win in this category, with 8,618 people per square mile. That seems like a lot when you compare it to the rest of the US, which averages a mere 94 people per square mile. Vast difference there, but remember, we're talking about New York here. It's only getting worse from this point. Queens is relatively huge compared to all the other boroughs. It has itself 109 square miles of land, giving it second place with 22,000 people per square mile. The Bronx has a reasonable, if you can call any of these numbers reasonable, 35,000 people in each of its 42 square miles. And this is where Brooklyn ultimately loses out on its most populated title. Because while yes, it has 2.6 million people, it's spread out over a relatively large area of 71 square miles. Certainly less spacious than Queens, but a lot more than both the Bronx and Manhattan combined. In total, Brooklyn clocks in at 38,600 people per square mile. And speaking of that Manhattan number, with only 22.8 square miles to its name, that 1.6 million people suddenly looks a lot bigger, nearly doubling Brooklyn's population density with 75,000 people per square mile. That is a lot of humanity in not a lot of space, and with very limited resources. If that's not a recipe for disaster during the post-apocalypse, I don't know what is. And so,
well, look at the bright side. Look at the bright side. More helping hands.
By totaling up the scores, it becomes very clear that, honestly, none of these options are completely ideal. While places like Staten Island might have themselves more green space than other boroughs and a smaller population, which means less fighting for resources, the land isn't exactly fertile. And worse, you would have nothing to defend yourself with. Manhattan will be an okay place in the short term, there's plenty of food and a decent supply of weaponry. That said, you're also struggling against massive overpopulation, as well as not enough land to sustain everyone's food needs. In the end, you'll want to end up in one of the boroughs with more green space, but hopefully one that can defend itself. The winner of this race isn't going to be the best in all categories, but a borough that's pretty strong across all categories. And that winner is, drumroll please, Queens. With its small population density, high amounts of parkland, and decent supply of police armories and food, this is the one that's gonna give you a fighting chance of staying alive. And while it's solid in all the other categories, there's one final qualifier that sets Queens completely apart from the rest of the pack: water. If we're gonna survive, we're gonna need a constant supply of fresh, clean water, except that
Fresh, clean. What the?
That's where things get tricky, because all of New York's water supply is controlled by two main suppliers: the Catskill Delaware water supply system and the Croton water supply system. Both of these systems are located outside of the 5 boroughs. Well, you could siphon a pipe if someone tampers with or pollutes your supply further up the system. That's gonna have some massive repercussions. We even see this in the 5th mission of the game, where the faction known as the Cleaners have taken over a water distribution facility, which begins polluting the supply to those downstream. If we're gonna survive, we're gonna need our own supply, something that all the other boroughs aren't going to be able to mess with. And the only borough that has that capability? Queens. The groundwater supply in southeastern Queens used to provide a small portion of the borough with fresh water until 2007. Now, it hasn't operated since then, but the infrastructure is there. And if you could get that supply switched on again, you are in the money. You have yourself water to drink, you can sell it to other survivors for supplies, you have water for your crops too. And at the very least, it certainly beats taking a swig out of the Hudson River. So there you have it. Queens, definitively the best New York borough, within a very specific set of hypothetical parameters. But
yeah, in a fictional world, in a fictional game, not in the real world, so yeah.
But hey, thanks once again to Ubisoft for sponsoring today's video. It's been fun to dive back into the city that I used to wander around with Stephanie as I was starting this whole YouTube thing. And now I get
Oh my gosh, Mad Pat looks so young.
to visit it whenever I want thanks to Tom Clancy's Division Resurgence. I also love the RPG-like system that they put into the game. Seriously, these guys know me so well at this point. You get to pick your specialization, which is essentially your class, but that isn't all. You then can customize your weapons and gear to really make your specialization unique to you and your playstyle. The story is also completely unique. This isn't a port, it's not a retelling of a previous game. It is a standalone and canon story, with the first 3 missions literally putting you into the hearts of the riots as the green poison breaks out across New York and the city is put into lockdown. It is a fascinating part of the franchise's story that we've never been able to see before. And now you can literally experience it whenever you want, wherever you want, because it's on your phone. So if you want to get in on the action and show everyone that knowledge really is power in a world of chaos, head on down to the description and click the link to sign up for the open beta today. And in the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you find this video quite interesting to watch. Very uniquely special and quite informative. So thank you so much to the team behind this video. You guys did a great job. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you so much. Subscribe! Yeah, seriously subscribe though. Thank you so much.